I want to start by asking you something before we begin this story. If you've ever faced a situation where your pride or silence caused someone you love to suffer, comment down below. Let me know if you felt that heavy weight in your chest, because today's story is about exactly that. And if you're ready, just settle in, maybe pour yourself a cup of tea, and listen to what happened in my life. I never thought I would be the kind of mother to make a mistake that could hurt my own child. But here I am, sharing this story with you, hoping someone out there can relate or maybe learn from my experience. My son, Jacob, was my world. From the moment I held him in my arms, I felt a bond that I could not put into words. He was small, fragile, and perfectly curious. I used to watch him sleep at night and wonder how I could ever protect him from the world. I thought I was doing everything right. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in a small town in the US. Our house wasn't large or fancy, but it was warm. The walls were painted in soft cream, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread most mornings, and my husband, Mark, worked long hours to make sure we never had to worry about money. I stayed home with Jacob, helping him with his schoolwork, reading bedtime stories, and making pancakes every Sunday morning. Life felt simple and calm. Jacob had just started middle school. He was bright, cheerful, and always eager to learn. But like any child, he sometimes made mistakes. That was normal. I tried to teach him gently, to guide him, but never to scold too harshly. One Thursday afternoon, I got a call from the principal of his school. I didn't know what to expect, but I could feel my stomach tighten. "Mrs. Williams," the principal began, her voice unusually formal, "I need to speak with you about Jacob. There's been an incident, and we require your immediate attention." I felt my chest tighten, but I smiled, thinking maybe it was a small misunderstanding. "Of course, Miss Thompson. What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a pause. Then she said, "Jacob has been involved in a conflict with another student. We need you to come in tomorrow. Also, we need you to apologize to the teacher involved." Apologize? I paused. I didn't understand. I had raised Jacob to always be respectful and honest. If he had done something wrong, he would apologize. But to ask me to apologize? It felt wrong, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was just part of school protocol. The next day, I went to the school. Jacob was waiting in the principal's office, his small hands fidgeting nervously in his lap. I tried to smile at him, to reassure him that everything would be fine. But I could feel something heavy in the room, something I couldn't shake. The principal looked at me with a kind of quiet firmness. "Mrs. Williams, if you do not apologize to the teacher, Jacob cannot remain enrolled in this school." I froze. The words hung in the air like a weight I could not lift. I wanted to speak, to argue, to explain that I did not need to apologize for something I did not do. But the look on Jacob's face stopped me. He was scared, confused. He trusted me. And yet in that moment, I realized that my own stubbornness, my pride, could hurt him in ways I had never imagined. I thought about what it meant to apologize. Was it a simple word? Or was it something deeper? Something that asked me to swallow my pride and admit that even if I thought I was right, someone else might see it differently. I struggled. And in my struggle, I saw Jacob's shoulders slump. His little body sank into the chair, and I felt a pain so deep it almost made me gasp. I left the principal's office without apologizing. I thought I was protecting myself, protecting my dignity. But as we drove home, Jacob was quiet. Usually he would chatter about his day, about his friends, about the little things that excited him. But that day, not a word. I kept glancing at him, my heart breaking a little more with every silent mile. That night, I watched him try to do his homework, but he kept staring at the notebook, unable to focus. "Mom," he finally whispered, barely lifting his eyes, "why can't you just say sorry?" His words were like a sharp knife through my chest. I wanted to hug him, to tell him I loved him, to promise him that everything would be okay. But the pride I had held on to for so long, the idea that admitting fault made me weak, stopped me from moving. And I realized, too late, that my silence was beginning to hurt him in ways I could never take back. The next morning, we received a letter from the school. Jacob had been officially expelled. I held the letter in my hands, my eyes blurred with tears I couldn't hold back. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the floor, thinking about every moment I could have said sorry, every chance I could have prevented this pain, every smile I had promised him and failed to protect. Mark came home that evening. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat beside me, his hand over mine. He said, "We'll figure this out." But I knew I had crossed a line that was not easy to fix. Jacob went to bed that night, but I couldn't. I walked through the house, looking at his empty room, his school books neatly stacked on the shelf, his little jacket hanging on the chair. I kept asking myself over and over what I could have done differently. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. And in that quiet, I started to remember all the little moments where my pride had shown up before. Small disagreements, stubborn refusals, the times I thought I was right and insisted on it even when it caused tension. And I realized, with a weight that pressed on my chest, that it wasn't just this incident with the school, it was a pattern, and my son was paying the price. The days after Jacob's expulsion felt heavy, like a cloud that refused to move. He woke up, got dressed, and sat at the breakfast table, but the usual spark in his eyes was gone. He didn't ask questions, he didn't smile. He just picked at his cereal quietly, as if it had no taste. I watched him and felt my heart ache more with every bite he didn't finish. I tried to talk to him. "Jacob, we'll find a new school soon," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm. He looked up, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Mom, why did this happen to me? I didn't do anything wrong." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that it was all me, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I tell a 9-year-old that his mother's pride had cost him everything he loved about school? How could I explain that sometimes adults make mistakes too, mistakes that hurt the ones they love most? Instead, I just nodded. I reached across the table and held his hand, hoping he could feel my love through my silence. But I knew it wasn't enough. Over the next few days, tension grew between Mark and me. He tried to reason with me, to help me see that my refusal to apologize wasn't worth what Jacob had lost. "Mark," he said one evening, his voice quiet but firm, "you need to think about him, not yourself. This isn't about pride anymore. It's about Jacob's happiness." I didn't respond. I wanted to, but I felt trapped. Part of me wanted to swallow my pride and apologize, to fix what I could, but another part of me felt stubborn, convinced that admitting fault would make me weak, as if weakness could ever protect anyone. Jacob noticed the tension, of course. Children are sensitive like that. He would sit on the couch, glancing at me, and I could see the questions in his eyes that he didn't have the courage to ask. "Mom, why won't you talk to me?" Some nights I would sit in his room after he fell asleep, watching him breathe softly in the darkness, wondering how I could have let it get this far. The guilt settled deep in my chest, pressing on me like a heavy stone. I realized that every silent refusal, every moment I thought I was protecting my dignity, was only hurting the person I loved most. One afternoon, I decided to take him for a walk. The autumn leaves crunched under our feet as we walked down our quiet street. He held my hand tightly, and for a moment I could almost forget the weight of everything that had happened. "Mom," he said, his voice small, "do you still love me even if I'm not in school?" I stopped walking and knelt to look at him. His eyes were so big, so full of innocence and trust. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "Of course I do, Jacob," I whispered. "Always." He smiled faintly, but the sadness lingered. I knew the smile was fragile, and I knew that fixing it wouldn't be simple. It wasn't just about finding a new school. It was about rebuilding his trust, about showing him that sometimes adults make mistakes too, but that love can survive them if we are willing to admit those mistakes. The next week, the school called again. They asked me to reconsider, to apologize, and they hinted that if I didn't, Jacob could never return. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on me. I thought about Jacob, about his dreams, about the friends he had made, the teachers he liked, the routines he cherished. And I realized that my pride, my stubbornness, was nothing compared to his happiness. I put the phone down. I needed time to think. But time, I realized, was running out. Jacob was hurting every single day, and every moment I delayed, I was hurting him more. That night, I tried to talk to him again. "Jacob, I think I know what I need to do," I said softly. He looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "You're going to say it?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. It wasn't easy to admit fault, even when I knew it was the right thing to do. But I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, Jacob, I'm going to apologize. I want to fix this." The next day, I went back to the school. I walked into the principal's office, my hands trembling slightly. The teacher involved was there, her expression calm but expectant. I swallowed hard, looking at her eyes, and then I said the words that felt so impossible just days ago. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. It was simple. It was short. But it carried all the weight of my pride, my stubbornness, and my love for my son. And in that moment, I realized something important. Apologizing doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you someone who can repair what has been broken. The teacher nodded, accepting the apology, and then, as if a weight had been lifted from the room, she smiled gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Jacob can return tomorrow." I left the office and ran into Jacob's arms. He hugged me tightly, and I could feel the tension, the fear, the sadness of the past week melt away just a little. His small body trembled against mine, and I whispered over and over, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." That evening, at home, we sat at the dinner table together. It was quiet at first, but slowly, conversation returned. Jacob talked about his day, about his friends, about the little things he had missed. I listened, grateful for every word, every smile, every laugh that came after a week of silence and sorrow. I knew that things weren't perfect. My pride had caused real damage, and rebuilding trust would take time. But I also knew that love, patience, and humility could mend even the deepest hurts if we are brave enough to admit when we are wrong. After Jacob returned to school, life slowly began to settle. though I knew the events of that week had left a mark on all of us. I watched him play in the yard, hear him laugh at small jokes, and it felt like pieces of my heart that had been heavy with guilt were finally lifting. But the weight of my pride still lingered, a quiet reminder of how easily love could be clouded by stubbornness. Each day, I tried to make it right in small ways. I sat with Jacob after school, asking about his classes, his friends, the teachers he liked. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to defend myself. I just let him talk and shared my support. Sometimes he would glance at me, a little shy, and whisper, "Thanks, Mom," and I would feel tears prick my eyes. Those words were simple, but they carried the weight of forgiveness. Mark and I spent time reflecting as well. We talked about how our actions, even unintentional ones, ripple through our family, shaping our children's sense of safety and trust. We realized that sometimes holding on to pride can be more damaging than any mistake, and that admitting fault, even when it's hard, is a way to show our children that it's okay to be human, to stumble, to learn, and to grow. I remember one evening, after Jacob had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with Mark, staring at the soft light coming from the kitchen. "Do you think he'll ever really forgive me?" I asked quietly. Mark reached for my hand. "He already has, Hansela. Children are forgiving, but more importantly, he knows you love him. And that love, it matters more than pride ever will." I thought about that for a long time. I thought about every time I had let my stubbornness or ego take priority over Jacob's feelings, every moment where I had thought being right was more important than being kind. And I made a promise to myself. I would try, every day, to choose love over pride. The next morning, I walked Jacob to school. The leaves were golden, drifting lazily to the ground, and the air smelled crisp and fresh. He held my hand, and for a moment I simply breathed in the simple joy of being with him. I knew that life would still have challenges, still have moments of tension and misunderstanding, but I also knew that we had survived this one together, and that gave me hope. During that walk, Jacob turned to me and said softly, "Mom, I was scared last week, but I'm glad you said sorry. I missed school, but I missed you more." I knelt down, looking into his eyes. "I missed you too, Jacob. I'm so sorry for everything." He smiled then, a real, bright smile that seemed to light up the world around us. And I realized in that moment that apology isn't just about the words. It's about showing that you care, that you see the hurt you've caused, and that you're willing to make it right. That week, we made small changes at home. I let Jacob make more decisions about his schoolwork, his routines, even little things like choosing the weekend activities. I learned to listen more, to step back, and to value his feelings above my own need to be right. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes old habits crept back in, moments where I wanted to assert control, but I reminded myself of that week, of the look on his face when he felt powerless, the tears he couldn't hold back. Over time, the school days returned to normal. Jacob regained his friends, his routines, his joy. And I, too, regained a sense of peace. But the lesson lingered. Love requires humility. Love sometimes asks you to swallow your pride, to apologize, even when it's uncomfortable, to put someone else's happiness first. I tell you this story not because I want to dwell on my mistakes, but because I hope it helps someone out there. Perhaps there's a parent who feels torn between pride and love, a spouse who has held on to stubbornness too long, a friend who refuses to admit fault. If you are that person, remember, the cost of pride can be far greater than the discomfort of saying, "I'm sorry." Now, whenever I watch Jacob run to the school bus with a laugh, or hear him tell a funny story from class, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for the chance to make things right, and for the reminder that love, patience, and humility can heal even deep wounds. I've learned to be kinder to myself, too. I've learned that mistakes don't define us, how we respond to them does. And I've learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the most important, to admit when we are wrong, to seek forgiveness, and to hold those we love closer than our own ego. Life isn't perfect. There will be challenges, disappointments, and moments of regret. But if we approach them with honesty, empathy, and courage, we can transform even the most painful experiences into lessons of love and growth. So if you're listening to this story, take a moment to think about the people in your life, the ones you love the most. Are there moments where pride has come between you and them? If so, maybe it's time to swallow it. Maybe it's time to apologize, not because you're weak, but because you're human, and love is always stronger than pride. And as I close this story, I want to leave you with one simple thought. Every apology, every act of humility, every small gesture of care can make a difference that echoes far beyond what you see. It can heal a child's heart, restore trust, and bring warmth back to a home that seemed cold. I hope Jacob's story and my own journey through stubbornness, regret, and love helps someone out there. Maybe it will remind you that it's never too late to make things right, to say the words that matter, and to choose love over pride. Because in the end, that's what life is really about. Love, forgiveness, family, and the courage to do the right thing, even when it's hard.